You're being dramatic, Claire. Marcus just needs somewhere stable right now. You have that big place all to yourself anyway. My aunt stood in the doorway of my condo wearing my gray cashmere cardigan, the one I'd left hanging on the hook by the door. She smiled like she'd already won. They changed the locks while I was at work. I'm standing in the hallway of the home I bought with 6 years of my own money, and my aunt is telling me to find an Airbnb. Before I tell you how I dismantled them without touching a single lock, tell me in the comments what's the most entitled thing a family member has ever done to you. I read every single one. I booked a room at a hotel on Queen Street West. It was clean, decent thread count, a window overlooking the street. But I couldn't sleep. I sat on the edge of the bed and did the math. My monthly mortgage was $2,800. The hotel was $220 a night. I was paying to be homeless in my own city while my cousin was sleeping in my bed, probably scrolling on my Wi-Fi, eating whatever was left in my fridge. The worst part wasn't the anger. The worst part was that I wasn't surprised. In my family, there are two kinds of people. There's Marcus, my cousin, 31 years old, perpetually between jobs, perpetually in some kind of crisis. He is the family project. The one everyone worries about, fundraises for, makes excuses for. Every Christmas, someone slips him cash. Every birthday, someone co-signs something. He is never okay, and somehow that is always someone else's responsibility to fix. And then there's me. I learned what I was about 3 years ago. My uncle, Marcus's father, had a major medical episode. Emergency surgery, long recovery, bills that his provincial coverage didn't fully absorb. Private room fees, specialist copays, prescription costs that stacked up fast. He called me crying. I didn't hesitate. I sent $18,000. I transferred it directly to my aunt with a note that said for Uncle Roy's recovery, no strings. I drained half my emergency fund because he was family, and I loved him, and that's what you do. 4 months later, I drove out to Brampton for Thanksgiving. There was a brand new truck in the driveway. Not used. New. Dark blue, dealer plates still in the window. I asked about it over dinner. My aunt said Marcus needed reliable transportation to get to his new job. I asked where they found the money. My uncle looked at his plate and said they'd managed to put a bit aside. They hadn't managed anything. That was my money. The money I sent to keep my uncle alive became a down payment on a truck for the son who'd never once sent a card on their anniversary. I sat at that table and ate turkey and smiled and said nothing, but something shifted in me that afternoon. I understood then that in this family, money I earned was not considered mine. It was considered pooled. It was considered available. I was not a person with a financial life. I was a resource that had finally reached withdrawal age. So when they showed up at my building on a Tuesday afternoon with Marcus and 2 hockey bags, I shouldn't have been shocked. And I wasn't. But I also wasn't ready. My aunt had called the day before. She said Marcus was having a hard time. His roommate had kicked him out. He had nowhere to go. Could he stay with me just for a week or two? I said I'd think about it. I did not say yes. I went to work the next morning and came home to find the deadbolt changed and my key not working. She'd gotten access through my building's concierge. She told him she was my family, that I'd given her permission, that she was dropping something off. I found out later she'd smiled and chatted him up for 10 minutes first. He handed over a spare keycard because she was charming and he was 22 and didn't know better. I knocked on my own door. My aunt opened it in my cardigan and told me Marcus needed stability right now. I stood there for 30 seconds, maybe less. Then I went downstairs, called a cab, and went to the hotel on Queen Street, because I didn't trust what I would do if I stayed in that hallway one more minute. The next morning I called my lawyer. His name is David Park, and he handles my business contracts. I told him what happened. I wanted them out by end of day. I wanted a locksmith, a police escort, whatever it took. He paused. Claire, he said carefully, I hear you, but there's a problem. I told him I had the deed. I told him my name was on the title, the mortgage, every document in that building's file. I know, he said, but your aunt told the concierge you authorized access. She's been there less than 48 hours, so there's no formal tenancy established yet. But if Marcus claims he had nowhere to go, and your aunt confirms she understood you'd agreed, this becomes a he said she said. And in Ontario, any dispute over occupancy rights can get complicated fast, especially if they dig in. A sheriff's removal could take weeks, maybe longer if they lawyer up. I stared at the ceiling. They're counting on you to pay them to leave, David said. Classic pressure play. They know you can't afford the fight, not the time, not the stress. I hung up. I looked out at the gray February sky over the city, and I thought about my aunt in my cardigan and Marcus's hockey bags in my front closet, and I made a decision. I was not going to evict them. I was going to make them evict themselves. For 4 days, I went completely quiet. I didn't text my aunt back. I didn't respond to my mother's calls, because yes, my own mother had called to mediate, which meant she already knew, which meant this was more coordinated than I'd let myself believe. I ignored my cousin's Instagram stories, which showed the CN Tower view from my living room window with a caption that said New Era. I let them settle. I let them exhale. I needed them comfortable enough to get greedy, because here's the thing about my family's fatal flaw. It isn't just that they're entitled. It's that they believe I am manageable. They have watched me be reasonable and accommodating for 30 years. And they have mistaken my patience for softness. They think when I back down, it means they've won. They have never once considered that I might be choosing my battles very carefully. On the 5th morning, I called my aunt from a number she didn't recognize. She picked up on the second ring. "Auntie," I said, and I made my voice smaller, tired. I channeled every version of myself that had sat at that Thanksgiving table and smiled and said nothing. I can't keep doing this. I talked to a financial advisor and he said fighting a family dispute over housing could cost me $40,000 in legal fees by the time it's done. I don't want that. I don't want to fight you. She made a soft sound. "Claire, we never wanted to fight either. We just needed somewhere for Marcus to." "I know," I said. "So here's what I want to do. I want to add Marcus to the title. Make it official. That way, he has stability. You stop worrying, and we stop fighting." A pause. I could hear her recalibrating. "You do that? I don't want to lose my family over a condo," I said. "But there's a process. My mortgage lender has to approve a co-borrower. Marcus would need to show he contributed to the down payment, even partially, or the bank won't approve the transfer. It's just how the paperwork works. How much would he need to show?" "My down payment was $95,000, I said. "He just needs to sign a statutory declaration confirming he contributed $30,000 of that he gave it to me to hold while I was saving. It's an internal document. The bank just needs it on file to process the title change." Silence. "He didn't actually give you money," she said slowly. "I know that and you know that," I said. "But the bank doesn't care about the specifics. They just need the form filled out correctly. It's a formality. People do this all the time in family property transfers." That was a lie. No one does this. What I was describing was mortgage fraud. I heard her cover the phone and talk to someone in the background. Then she came back. "All right," she said. "Send over the form. Let's get this settled." She thought she was helping her son get his name on a $600,000 condo for free. She thought I was folding because I always fold. She forgot that I spend my days reading contracts for a living and I have never once signed anything I didn't fully understand. While my lawyer was preparing the statutory declaration, I was doing what I should have done years ago. I was looking at public records. You don't need to hack anything. People's financial lives are a matter of public record in this country. You just have to know where to look and be willing to spend an afternoon looking. I went to the Ontario Court of Justice Civil Records database. I searched Marcus Dale Thompson. I found 2 small claims judgments against him. Unpaid rent. One from 2021. One from 2023. Both under $10,000, so they wouldn't flag on a standard credit check unless someone looked. Then I searched his parents, Roy and Diane Thompson. And there it was. A notice of bankruptcy filed under the Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act, registered 14 months ago through a licensed insolvency trustee in Brampton. They'd discharged just over $62,000 in consumer debt credit cards, a personal loan, a line of credit that had ballooned past the limit. Standard consumer bankruptcy. It happens. But what matters in a bankruptcy filing is the statement of affairs. I requested the document through the Office of the Superintendent of Bankruptcy Canada. It's public. It costs almost nothing. I printed page 3 and read it twice. Section 4. Assets at time of filing. Cash on hand. Nil. Savings accounts. Nil. Investments. Nil. No RRSPs. No TFSAs. No vehicles registered in their names. They had declared themselves completely asset-free to get their debts wiped clean by the federal government. And 14 months later, my aunt was about to sign a statutory declaration, swearing she and her husband had personally held $30,000 in cash savings that they'd quietly lent to me. They couldn't be broke for the Superintendent of Bankruptcy and solvent for my mortgage lender at the same time. If she signed, she was confessing to making a false declaration to a financial institution, which is fraud under Section 380 of the Criminal Code of Canada. And because it was connected to a previous bankruptcy filing, it also opened the door to a revisit of that discharge under the BIA. The trustee could have it reopened. The creditors could come back. Every dollar of debt they thought they'd erased could come roaring back with interest and penalties. I forwarded the bankruptcy records to David with one line. "The trap is ready. Schedule a notary." David booked a boardroom at his firm's office, in the financial district. We set it up carefully. A notary public to witness the signing. A paralegal to handle the documents. a phone on the table recording the session openly. David disclosed it at the start, which is all you need to do under Ontario law. I told my aunt this was standard for mortgage documentation. I told her the lender required sworn testimony for family contribution transfers. I told her to bring Marcus, since he'd be the one going on title. They arrived 12 minutes late. My aunt walked in first, moving like she owned the room. She was wearing a blazer I recognized, navy, structured, one I'd left at her house 2 Christmases ago, and never got back. Marcus followed, hands in his hoodie pockets, looking around the boardroom like he was calculating how much the furniture cost. He didn't make eye contact with me. They sat down. My aunt looked at David. Let's just get the form signed. We've got somewhere to be. David smiled the way lawyers smile when they're about to do something. He slid the statutory declaration across the table. Then he cleared his throat. Before we proceed, he said, I'm required, as a lawyer and officer of the court, to explain what you're signing. This is a statutory declaration, made under the Canada Evidence Act. Any false statement in this document carries the same legal weight as perjury. You are declaring, under oath, that you personally held $30,000 in savings that you provided to Claire for the purchase of her condominium. If this statement is found to be inconsistent with other financial filings, government, federal, or otherwise, you could be exposed to criminal liability. Do you understand? My aunt waved a hand. We understand. It's just paperwork. Marcus picked up the pen. David didn't move. I want to make sure you've heard me clearly. I said criminal liability. Not a fine, not a civil dispute. Marcus put the pen down halfway. He looked at his mother. My aunt looked at me. I looked back at her, and said nothing. She picked up the pen herself. We've been saving cash for years. We're careful people. Roy keeps a cash envelope at home, always has. It's not complicated. She signed her name in 2 clean strokes. Marcus signed below her. They leaned back. My aunt actually smiled at me, a small, satisfied smile. The smile of someone who believes they have just outmaneuvered a problem. All right, she said. So when does Claire's name come off the title? I didn't answer. I looked at David. He opened the folder beside him and placed a second document on the table. Face up, on top of the statutory declaration they'd just signed. It was the statement of affairs from their bankruptcy filing. My aunt's smile didn't disappear. It disconnected, like a screen going dark. That, I said, is your bankruptcy filing from 14 months ago. Filed through a trustee in Brampton under the Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act. I kept my voice level. On page 3, under Assets at Time of Filing, you both swore to the Office of the Superintendent of Bankruptcy Canada that you had 0 cash, 0 savings, 0 assets of any kind. You swore it under oath to have $62,000 in debt erased. I tapped the statutory declaration under David's hand. And 4 minutes ago, you swore also under oath, also on record, that you've been sitting on $30,000 in cash savings for years. The room was very quiet. Marcus looked at the table. My aunt's jaw tightened. That money came after. We saved it after the bankruptcy cleared. In 14 months, David said, not unkindly but without any warmth either, you accumulated $30,000 in undeclared cash savings. Cash that you've now disclosed to a financial institution in a statutory declaration. That disclosure triggers a reporting obligation. And if the timing doesn't hold up, it also triggers a review of your discharge under Section 178 of the BIA. You can't do that, my aunt said. Her voice had dropped. The discharge is final. Bankruptcy fraud reopens it, David said. And I have a professional obligation I can't ignore. Marcus surged forward suddenly. This is a setup. He looked at me, voice rising. You planned this. You wanted us to sign that so you could. The form was your idea, I said. I offered to add you to the title. You asked how to make it work. I explained the bank's documentation requirements. You signed voluntarily with a lawyer present after receiving a full legal caution. I paused. The recording has all of it. My aunt put both hands flat on the table. She looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen before. Not anger, exactly. Something older than anger. We're your family, she said. You changed my locks, I said. We needed somewhere for Marcus. You changed my locks, I said again. You walked into my home, changed the locks, and told me to find an Airbnb. While wearing my cardigan. So let's not talk about family right now. Marcus stood up fast enough that his chair scraped back. I'm not going back to a shelter. I'm not, you can't just. The condo is mine, I said. My name, my mortgage, my deed. You were never on any document. You entered through deception, and you have no tenancy rights. I looked at him steadily. The building has been notified. You have until 6 o'clock to remove your belongings. If you're there when the property manager arrives, she'll involve Toronto police for trespassing. My aunt stood. You're doing this over a condo. I'm doing this because you've treated my money, my home, and my life like they belong to you, I said. The SUV you bought with my $18,000. The birthday I didn't get a call because you were all at Marcus's thing in Niagara. The fact that this is the third time in 2 years someone has called me asking for money, and the first time anyone has called just to ask how I'm doing. She opened her mouth. I'm not angry, I said. And that was almost true. I'm just done. David's paralegal was already at the door. 2 minutes later, building security arrived to stand by while my aunt and cousin collected their things from my condo. I didn't go with them. I stayed in the boardroom and looked out at the city. I heard the door close. David set a coffee in front of me and sat down across the table. For what it's worth, he said. That was one of the cleaner traps I've seen. I learned from good contracts, I said. The filing went in that afternoon. David submitted the statutory declaration along with the statement of affairs and a covering letter to the Office of the Superintendent of Bankruptcy Canada, flagging the inconsistency. The trustee who had handled the original discharge was notified. Within a week, the discharge was under formal review. It took 11 weeks from that point. The creditors were notified. The review found that my aunt and uncle had failed to fully disclose assets. There was also a small TFSA that hadn't appeared on the original filing, separate from the cash issue, and the discharge was partially revoked. The erased debt was reinstated. They entered a repayment arrangement. It wasn't prison. But it wasn't nothing either. Marcus moved in with a friend in Mississauga. As far as I know, he still hasn't found steady work. But that's no longer a problem I'm asked to solve. I had my locks rekeyed that same night. I stood in my front hallway and just stood there for a minute, looking at my own space. My coat on the hook. My shoes by the door. A few things slightly out of place from the week they'd been there, but nothing that couldn't be put back. I didn't call my mother back for 3 weeks. When I did, I kept it short. I told her I loved her, but that I was going to need some time to figure out what this family actually looks like now. She cried a little. I didn't. Here's the thing no one tells you about cutting off people who've been taking from you for years. There's a grief to it that doesn't go away just because you made the right call. I don't miss being used. But I miss the version of my family I spent a long time hoping they were. The one that would have noticed I was struggling. The one that would have called, just to call. That family doesn't exist, and probably never did. And that's the part that actually takes time. But I sleep in my own bed now. My name is on the door. My savings are mine. And the next time someone tells me I have such a big place, all to myself, I'm keeping the cardigan. If this story hit something real for you, subscribe. And tell me, have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping your life? Because I think more of us have made that call than anyone talks about.